Hello, everyone. Welcome to Measuring the Value of Trust for Health Insurers, a Peppers and Rogers Group webinar. I'm Liz Glogowski, Executive Editor of Strategy and moderator for today's event. Before we get started, you'll notice that we have a Twitter hashtag for today's event listed on this first slide. So as the presentation goes through, please feel free to connect and share what you learned via Twitter during the event or after by using the hashtag PRGHealthcare. And I will be tweeting from our Peppers and Rogers Group Twitter account as the discussion progresses. So welcome, everyone. Today's speakers are Marc Ruggiano, partner at Peppers and Rogers Group, and Dr. Tom Lacki, Director of Research. Marc leads Peppers and Rogers Group's healthcare practice and brings a wealth of expertise and cross-industry experience to today's discussion. Tom directs all of Peppers and Rogers Group's primary research activities to empirically explore the current state of the practice of customer centricity. He will present some of our latest research about trust and the healthcare space. So before we begin, let's review some logistics. For a PDF copy of today's slides, you can click on the green PDF icon button at the bottom center of your screen. If you encounter any issues with the PDF download, please notify us with the purple Contact One-to-One Media button. We also encourage you to ask questions of our presenters during the event. You can click on the Q&A button on your screen, type your question, and then just hit Submit. We've made time for a question and answer section at the end of the webinar to answer any questions you may have. Your questions will remain anonymous during the discussion. And we want to make this an interactive experience, so we have 2 poll questions during the program. We recommend that you turn off your pop-up blockers so that you can see them. And we will also have a survey at the end of the program. And there's also a self-help feature to the right of the enlarged slide link where you'll find a list of FAQs. And submitting a question is always an option if you run into any technical difficulty. We've got people who will be able to answer them right away. And there's contact information for Marc and Tom at the end of the event if you'd like some further information as well. Finally, all attendees will receive an email with a link to the archived version of the webinar and a preview article from our executive journal on the topic, Creating a Healthy Level of Trust. So we'll discuss more about that at the end of the presentation. So let's move on to today's agenda. First, Marc will begin with an overview of the healthcare market and discuss what health insurers are facing today. Then, Tom will talk about why trust matters and present the research, the details that we conducted on the topic of trust in the healthcare space. He'll also discuss what the findings mean for health insurers. Then, Marc will return and take over to discuss how to create a trusted environment for consumers. So let's begin. Marc, you want to take over and start us off with what health insurers are facing today?
Thanks, Liz. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to start by quickly talking about some things that most of you are already familiar with. These are things that are in the headlines of the periodicals, the newspapers, all the things that we read. They're the motivation for a lot of the rhetoric that we hear in various circles of government, and they are certainly apt descriptions of a number of the different challenges that we as an industry are facing. But I'm not going to elaborate on those things because I want to get into the most interesting stuff. So after I talk about a couple of trends, I'm going to introduce the research that we've been doing. We'll talk a little bit about ideal health insurers, or the current perceptions of health insurers, ideal health insurers, and then Tom Lacki will get into the meat of our research and the reason that we're on the call today. The slide that you should be seeing now just illustrates the alarming trend in healthcare spending. And there are many versions of this slide, and I'm sure that some of you have seen this particular one from the OECD. But we all know that the United States spends more on our health care than certainly all of the other nations in this OECD study, and most likely more than any other nation on earth. We spent 16% of our GDP in 2008 and that equates to a little over $7,500 per capita. And these are inflation adjusted and purchasing power parity adjusted across these countries. That's 51% more than the next highest country, which is Norway. Norway spends a little over $5,000 and is just ahead of the number 3 country, Switzerland. Keep those two comparisons in mind as we flip to the next slide. But the takeaway from here is certainly that we are spending at the top of the list to ensure the health of our citizens. When you look at what that's buying us, there are many measures of the effectiveness of that spend. Life expectancy is certainly one of the broadest and one of the ones that economists, macroeconomists in particular, like to look at. We're looking at it here, again, covering most of those same OECD nations. You can see the red bar showing you where the United States is in terms of total life expectancy at birth. The U.S. is, on average, the life expectancy is a little over 79 years, and that average has increased about 10 years since this data was first compiled in 1960. Obviously, as many people know, men still lag women. The average for men is 76.3, and for women it's 81.9. So those 5 extra years that women have to enjoy life. In the U.S., the average is 78.1, and again, that's the red bar that you see. That places us 27th in the list. Norway, the average is a little over 80, 80.6 to be exact. They are number 11 on the list, and Switzerland, the other company that we looked at on the previous slide, or the other country we looked at on the previous slide, is at 81.9, or number 2 on the list. When you look at the change in those life expectancies, Switzerland comes out at the forefront. That life expectancy has increased a little over 10 years since 1980. The U.S. has increased our life expectancy a little over 8 years. And so our dramatically escalating expenditures have produced, in absolute measures, not the kind of life expectancy impact that we would hope. And in relative measures, the improvement that we've experienced since 1980 lags as well. On the next slide, what we see is that this experience, in addition to not generating the overall impact on life expectancy that we would like to see, it's not satisfying the participants in the system either. And so this is a Forrester data that shows a variety of different industries that are ranked according to the customer experience as perceived by consumers in Forrester's survey. There are 160 participants in this. In the health insurance sector, some of the participants include Anthem, Cigna, United Healthcare, Kaiser, and Humana. In this research, USAA is the top company out of all of them, but there are several healthcare companies that are performing well. The highest-rated commercial healthcare company is Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois at 68, tied with Kaiser Permanente. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois is also the most improved company in the results from Forrester this year. But the main takeaway of this slide is that as an industry, we're not delivering experiences that satisfy consumers. And so on top of spending the most as a nation, delivering health outcomes that do not match the expenditure, the experiences that consumers have as a result are not satisfactory. And so it's no wonder that when you look at the next slide, which documents consumers' perception of healthcare or of health insurers, it's not surprising that you see many negative words and phrases. You see a couple of different clusters of things in this output from our research, Peppers and Rogers research. You see consumers grouping overwhelming, frustrating, and confusing as descriptors of health insurers today. You see another cluster around complex, rigid, and unreliable, and another cluster around impersonal, distant, and uncaring. Right? It's not all negative, although many of the larger words in the tag cloud show the negative impressions that consumers have. There are pockets of positives as well, and certainly things that can be built on by the industry. If you look in the upper right corner of the tag cloud, you see things like available, friendly, well-intentioned, and competent. The result of all of this is an environment of distrust, and this is the subject of the research that Tom Lacki, my colleague, will be taking you through here in just a couple of minutes. But what this slide illustrates is the topmost level output of our research. And as you can see, nearly 2/3 of consumers are either distrustful of their health insurers or they are neutral, which means that nearly 2/3 of consumers are not satisfied with the health insurer that they have today. And as another study from Forrester illustrates, a significant number of those consumers are likely to be considering alternatives if they are able to make a change. And so, there are many reasons why the situation with the current perceptions of health insurers is unsatisfactory, and there are many reasons why this is a tremendous opportunity going forward. And so what we see here on this slide is that there's 29% on the left-hand pie chart right off the bat that if they had an opportunity to switch health insurance providers, they would consider it, either because they are neutral to the question or they've already expressed a likelihood to do so. And of the remainder, if you look at the boxed bars on the right-hand side, there's an additional 21% that are likely to consider it if the circumstances are right. And so fully 50% of insured consumers are potentially in the market if the right circumstances are in place. And so it's our job to figure out what right means, what matters the most to consumers, and what we have to do about it. This tag cloud shows you the answers that consumers gave in our research to the questions about the ideal health insurer. And this tag cloud begins to answer those questions of what matters most and what we as an industry can do about it. You see some clusters here around caring, understanding, and sympathetic. You see another cluster around accessible, transparent, and personal. And finally, a cluster around knowledgeable, honest, and trustworthy. After digging into these results, Peppers Rogers Group uncovered some of the real drivers that are at the root, at the foundation of all of these. Which ones do you think, if you looked at the words in the tag cloud, think to yourself, which ones of these would bubble to the top? Probably no surprise, given the focus of this webinar, that trustworthy was one of the most powerful words in this tag cloud. You can see, and Tom will talk about in just a minute, that trustworthiness, trustability, is of paramount importance. We believe that trustworthy health insurers will be the leading choice of consumers in the decade to come, and that winners in the coming competition in the changing healthcare sector will be the ones that are able to be the trusted partner for the consumers that they do business with. Trustability is critical, and Tom will explain in detail how trustability drives bottom line performance in terms of dollars. It drives consumer behavior such as advocacy and loyalty that are critical to the success of any health insurer. And in addition, and equally importantly, trustability drives beneficial health outcomes, which lead to the success that all of us place and the reason that many of us are in the industry that we're in. So as we shift gears, Tom Lacki is going to tell you why all of these things happen, and then we'll close with a discussion about how to begin to take action on some of them. Tom?
Great. Thank you, Mark. What you're about to see in the next 20 slides or so are numbers. But, they're not just any numbers. They're numbers that tell a compelling story about the importance of trust for health insurers today. And the numbers are empirical. They're based on consumer research. A few months ago, Peppers and Rogers Group gathered data from almost 3,000 adults in the United States through an online questionnaire. And as we progress through this section of the webinar in which those research findings are discussed, I encourage you to think about these questions. How does my own company compare to these results? What is or could my company be doing differently to improve? And why might this matter? For example, how might it help to organically grow the business? So with those questions in mind, let's get started and look through the trust lens. To set the stage and to provide an easy basis for comparing and understanding the research findings, a lens was created to group the 3,000 research respondents into the categories of distrusters, neutrals, and trusters based on their response to one straightforward question: overall, my health insurer can be trusted, on a 0 to 10 scale, mirroring the well-known and well-respected structure of the commonly used Net Promoter or NPS question. On this 0 to 10 scale, customer behaviors have been shown to fall into 3 logical clusters. Those enthusiastic customers who are at the very top of the scale with a rating of 9 or 10, the passively satisfied group who provide a rating of 7 or 8, and the actively dissatisfied group with ratings in the 0 to 6 range. Throughout this presentation, I will refer to these as the trusters, the neutrals, and the distrusters, respectively. Now, with this new lens in hand, let's take a look through it and see how well the health insurance industry is doing. When looking through the trust lens across all health insurers included in this research, the largest subset, as Marc pointed out earlier, 43%, fall into the distruster category. That's more than 2 out of every 5 customers. To rephrase the famous statement from the crew of Apollo 13, we can summarize the slide by saying, health insurers, we have a problem. Now, a customer's level of trust may not be important in every purchase decision in every circumstance, especially in cases where the downside risk of making a wrong choice is minimal. But in general, it is important under circumstances where uncertainty is high. And specifically, it is important for health insurers. It's not illustrated on this slide, but when we asked participants in this research, how important is the selection of your health care insurance plan to you on a 0 to 10 scale, where 0 was not at all important and 10 represented very important, 62% of all respondents rated that statement a 9 or a 10, indicating how very important the selection of a health insurer is. And even among distrusters, the mean rating was 8.3. In summary, health insurers, on average, have a substantial subset of customers for whom trust is low. It's important because the choice of a health insurer is important, and trust plays an important role in important decisions. Let's look through the trust lens again, this time to better understand how trusters and distrusters perceive their health insurer. Okay, there's a lot of information on this slide, so please be patient. To understand these results, first understand what was asked of the participants. Participants were presented with 22 pairs of adjectives, such as clear or confusing, that you see, for example, at the very top of the diagram, and were asked to rate their own health insurer on a scale where -3 was confusing and +3 was clear. In a similar way, every other attribute pair was rated. The green line represents the mean scores for each attribute pair for the distrusters, and the blue line for the trusters. The closer a line is to the outside of a circle, the more the positive attribute of the pair describes health insurers, and the closer it is to the center of the circle, the more that the negative attribute describes health insurers. What we see here is that across a wide variety of pairs of attributes, trusters rate their health insurer much more positively than distrusters. So, from a service performance perspective, trusters see their health insurer as more easy, more flexible, helpful, effective, and fast. From a communications perspective, trusters see their health insurer as more clear, more believable, more informative. And from an empathetic perspective, trusters see their health insurer as more caring, generous, fair. In contrast, distrusters generally perceive their health insurer with indifference on most of these attributes, with mean ratings near the midpoint of the scale. In summary, when customers look through the trust lens, they see a very different health insurer depending upon whether they trust or distrust that company. Before proceeding further, let's get a sense from all of you in the audience about the trustworthiness of your own company. Liz, I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So far, so good. This is really great research to really start the conversation going. But we do want to hear from you, as Tom mentioned, and we'd like to ask you all a question. To what extent is your company trustworthy? And the answers are not at all, to a small extent, to some extent, to a moderate extent, or to a great extent. So if you want to take a second, think about your own company and how trustworthy you think you guys are. Please submit your answer. We'll wait a minute, and we'll get everyone's answers to the question in a moment. Okay, that probably should be about enough time. So I will, let's see how everybody answered. And we should get that in 1 second. Okay, here we go. To what extent is your company trustworthy? Not at all, a few of you. To a small extent was 0. To some extent, 23%. To a moderate extent, 33%, and to a great extent, 40%. So that's great news that companies are being trustworthy. Tom will then delve a little bit more into the research that sometimes customer perceptions may be a little bit different than company perceptions, but it's really great to get a baseline of trustworthiness before we continue. So, Tom, if you want to take over again and continue with the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz. So continuing the theme from the poll question, let's now use the same trust lens and change the focus from health insurers in general to particular health insurers. Illustrated on this slide are the distribution of distrusters, neutrals, and trusters for 6 major health insurers included in this research. Note the following. Within each health insurer examined in this research, there is a diversity of trust levels. No one health insurer has all trusters or all distrusters, for example. Second, as compared to one another, the concentration of trusters across health insurers varies from a low of about 33% to a high of 54%. And in all cases, each health insurer has substantial room for improvement in developing trust more extensively across its entire customer base, with the percentage of distrusters ranging from about 29 to 46%. For reasons that I will discuss a bit later in the webinar, this should be worrisome since each health insurer has a substantial subset of customers who don't perceive them as highly trustworthy. And I know the question that you're now asking yourselves: what actions help to enhance or diminish customers' trust of a health insurer? We'll get there shortly, but before doing so, let's take one more look at individual health insurers, this time taking into consideration the fact that individual customers differ in their general disposition to be trusting of anyone or anything. This concept of share of trust will take a bit of explanation, so please be patient and please stay with me. I think the destination will be worth the ride. To assess an individual's overall capacity to trust, 3 statements from the General Social Survey, a tool used by social scientists, were presented to the research participants to rate, first of all, trust. Respondents were asked, generally speaking, would you say that most people can be trusted or that you can't be too careful in dealing with people? Second, they were asked a question about fairness. Do you think most people would try to take advantage of you if they got the chance, or would they try to be fair? And third, they were asked about helpfulness. Would you say that most of the time people just try to be helpful, or that they are mostly looking out for themselves? Rating trust is straightforward and makes obvious sense, and in fairness and helpfulness, those were chosen because those facets roughly correspond to an idea that we'll touch upon later, namely the fact that to be trustworthy, a company must have goodwill, or the intent to be trustworthy, and it must also have competence, or the actual delivery of trustworthy actions. An average of the ratings to those three statements was used to estimate trust capacity, or the extent to which a customer is disposed to being generally distrustful or to being generally trustful. Now, with that knowledge in hand, the interesting question is this. To what extent do health insurers generate trust over and above the individual customer's general disposition toward being trusting? So the ratio of trust in the health insurer to trust capacity is share of trust. When that ratio is equal to 1, it means that the amount of trust in the health insurer is equal to a customer's overall level of being trusting. When it's less than 1, it means that trust in the health insurer is inferior to a customer's overall level of being trusting. And, of course, when it's greater than 1, it means that the health insurer is generating a level of trust that is superior to a customer's overall level of being trusting. In summary, this notion of share of trust corrects for differences in the composition of a health insurer's customer base because it takes into consideration those customers' overall trust capacity. So let's look at the same set of health insurers again, but this time in terms of share of trust. Recall that in the previous slide, Anthem was the poorest performer, having the lowest percentage of trusters. Here, however, we see that Anthem is excelling based on the share of trust metric with a value of 1.7, meaning that the company is generating 70% more trust than the trust capacity of its customer base in general. Both views of a health insurer are beneficial. The distribution of trusters, neutrals, and distrusters that we examined earlier shows on an absolute basis how well the health insurer is succeeding in engendering trust. And the examination of share of trust shows on a relative basis how well the health insurer is succeeding in creating trust over and above its own customer's own disposition to being generally trustful. Together, these two types of analyses paint a more comprehensive picture of what's happening across customers and within a health insurer. Now, let's shift gears and look at several facets of customers' experiences with a health insurer and how those experiences impact trust. Okay. In this and in the next several slides, we're going to look at the degree to which research participants agree or disagree that their health insurer exhibits a specific behavior. Those ratings are on a 0 to 10 scale with the rated behaviors listed across the horizontal axis of the chart. For each behavior, the rating is shown separately for distrusters and trusters. For example, looking at the second set of bars from the left, we see that trusters much more strongly agree that their health insurer processes claims accurately than do distrusters, a mean rating of 9.1 versus 5.6 to be precise. Note that the same pattern occurs uniformly across all of the attributes listed in this chart, which address the foundational basics of being a health insurer. After all, no matter how well-intentioned a health insurer may be, if they don't process claims accurately, if they don't show business and technology innovation, if they don't make enrollment straightforward, then they're not going to be perceived as trustworthy. In summary, a first step for health insurers in generating trust is to never forget the basics and to do them well. Keep your promises, stay on the forefront of new technology and services, and make it easy for customers. Next, let's look at some aspects of communications. First, communications from health insurers. So these communications are an important determinant of building trust. After all, it is through communications that a customer gets to know the health insurer. When those communications exhibit key characteristics, they are successful in building customers' trust, as shown in these results. So, first, communications need to be clearly written. Clarity builds trust. Concealment or camouflage does not. Second, communications should be proactive. Being proactive demonstrates that a health insurer has a customer's best interests at heart. Third, communications such as easy-to-read statements and the use of simple language, these things enhance trust, again reinforcing the concept of clear communications. Fourth, we see that timeliness is key. And finally, communications must be relevant, meaning that they reflect the customer's unique needs and interests. A second facet of communication from health insurers concerns frequency and channel. As depicted in this chart, customers that experience too little or too many communications, as compared to those who receive the right amount, have a higher proportion of distrusters. So, what's the right amount? That's an answer that a health insurer should know for each individual customer, as opposed to a generic on-average statistic. The preferred communication frequency could, for example, be gathered during enrollment or at other customer touchpoints. In addition, as illustrated on the right-hand side of the chart, the extent to which a customer's communication channel preference, such as email, direct mail, and telephone calls, the extent to which those preferences are honored impacts trust. The proportion of trusters is highest when the preferred channels are consistently used, and decreases as that behavior of the health insurer deteriorates. Not illustrated on the slide, but as you may suspect, the highest rating occurs when both the communication frequency and the desired channels are used, and that results in a rating of 8.5 on the 0 to 10 scale. Next, let's look at customer-initiated communications with the health insurer. In this chart, we see a few key facets that characterize customers' interactions with a health insurer and help to build trust. Those facets include listening. So when customers perceive the health insurer as caring enough to listen well, trust is enhanced. So look, for example, at the statements, representatives of my health insurer listen carefully to my issues and concerns. The second facet is problem solving. When customers see their health insurer working on their behalf to address a concern, trust is enhanced, and that's reflected in statements like, I can typically solve any problem I'm having by contacting my health insurer. And a third facet is establishing an emotional connection. So when customers experience the human side of a health insurer, trust is enhanced, as reflected, for example, in the statement, at the conclusion of a contact, I am warmly and genuinely thanked for being a customer. Since these aspects of customer-to-company interactions impact trust, it suggests that customer service personnel and a health insurer should be hired, trained, recognized, and rewarded for listening well, for having dedicated and an empowered attitude to work on solving customer problems, and also to appreciate the warm and fuzzy benefits of a humanistic touch. The benefits of a health insurer that we have reviewed so far in this webinar concern the company's competence, such as the basics of enrollment and communication characteristics. When those are executed well, the behaviors of the health insurer enhance customers' trust by demonstrating proficiency. These experiences impact the perception of the health insurer and emphasizes the fact that they're doing things right, because competence builds confidence in the trustworthiness of the health insurer. Beyond doing things right, a second aspect of trust addresses the complementary facet of doing the right things. This means having the intent or the goodwill to act in customers' best interests. Let's look next at doing the right things. In other words, let's look at this idea of goodwill. First and foremost, note the set of bars on the left side of this chart depicting the differences between trusters and distrusters to the statement, my health insurer focuses on doing the right thing for its customers. In this research and in other research that we've done, this one statement, more than any other one examined in the research, most reliably differentiates trusters from distrusters. So the perception that the health insurer is committed to doing the right thing for its customers means that it's acting like a friend and is placing the interests of the customers first. When health insurers act to proactively do the right thing, the relationship is strengthened. In summary, when customers experience behaviors that demonstrate goodwill, they become trusters. When other customers see behaviors in their health insurer that are contradictory to goodwill, they become distrusters. The goal, therefore, is to constantly and consistently show goodwill, supported by competence, to to build trust and to move a higher and higher proportion of customers into the truster category. Why should this be the goal? Because it's not only in the interests of the customer, it's really also very much in the interests of the health insurer as well, as we'll see in the next few slides. Before turning our attention to the rewards of earning customers' trust, however, let's do another quick audience poll. Liz?
Okay, thank you, Tom. So we've got another question for everyone. And this question is, to what extent is the success of your business dependent on customers' trust? And the answers are, again, not at all, to a small extent, to some extent, to a moderate extent, or to a great extent. So if everyone wants to take a moment to consider this question and answer it, we will collect the responses and share them with the group. So to what extent is the success of your business dependent on customers' trust? And in some cases, the theory is a little different than the practice, but let's see how everybody responded. Okay. Just take one more minute to let everyone respond. And okay, I think we're ready. So we've got a lot of people consider it to a great extent. So 68.7% and 25% consider it moderate, 6.2% to some, and no one thinks it's not at all or to a small extent. So those are good results. And with that, Tom, if you want to continue with some more details of the research, we're really getting into some very fascinating stuff.
Good. Okay. Well, thanks, Liz. Building on this idea of linking business success to customers' trust, let's now look at some self-reported ways in which trust impacts outcomes, beginning with the idea of commitment. So the first outcome of interest that we'll examine is customer commitment. And commitment really refers to an attitudinal bond between the customer and the company. Academic researchers have defined commitment as an enduring desire to maintain a valued relationship, and also describe it as feelings of belonging and a sense of psychological attachment. In this chart, commitment is measured as a weighted average of the research participants' responses to a few statements, such as, I feel a strong attachment to my health insurer. And that's displayed on the vertical axis of the chart. Here we see that trusters report a significantly higher level of commitment to their health insurer than distrusters. It's important because, in general, attitudes are precursors of behaviors. And I suspect that every health insurer would want their customers to strongly agree with statements such as, I am fully committed to my health insurer. And it can, in fact, happen if trust is enhanced. The counterpart to attitudinal commitment is behavioral loyalty. In this chart, we see that trusters report a significantly higher level of loyalty to their health insurer than distrusters, more strongly agreeing to statements such as these. I anticipate that I will remain a customer of my health insurer for a long time, and I feel a strong sense of loyalty to my health insurer. Loyalty will increasingly be a concern for health insurers with the implementation of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act in the United States and the introduction of health insurance exchanges. 2 years from now, in 2014, it's estimated that 12 million consumers will choose their own health insurers through a health insurance exchange, representing about $60 billion in premiums. And 5 years later, in 2019, those estimates are projected to rise to 28 million consumers and $20 billion in premiums, respectively. And finally, in a similar way, this chart shows that trusters report a significantly higher level of advocacy of their health insurer than distrusters, and are more willing to recommend their health insurer to family members and colleagues, and are also more willing to serve as ambassadors. So word-of-mouth advocacy of a company is becoming ever more important as social media continues to grow. For health insurers specifically, Forrester has reported that 22% of consumers told someone about a good experience with a health insurer, and 27% shared a bad experience in the past 90 days. The average number of people told about a good experience was 4.2, and of a bad experience, 4.8. That's a considerable impact on a health insurer's brand, especially given that word-of-mouth comments are more believable than what a company claims about itself through its own advertising. For these three outcomes, commitment, loyalty, and advocacy, how much improvement occurs as trust is increased? Let's look next at the sensitivity of the output to changes in the input. Shown in this chart is how much each of these three outcomes, commitment, loyalty, and advocacy, increase for a single unit of improvement in trust for the 6 health insurers examined in this research. In essence, it represents the efficiency with which a health insurer converts trust to a business outcome. While there's variations between health insurers, in general, a 1-unit increase in trust enhances commitment, loyalty, and advocacy by about 0.3 units. That may not sound like much, but note that the effects are additive. The total business benefit is a 0.3-unit increase in commitment plus a 0.3-unit increase in loyalty plus a 0.3-unit increase in advocacy. Next, let's look at the impact of trust in the workplace through which many people today obtain their health care insurance. As displayed in this chart, to a significantly greater extent than distrusters, trusters recommend to their employer that they keep the same health insurer next year. As shown on the right-hand side of the chart, trusters are also more willing to find another job that would allow them to stay with their current health insurer if their employer were to switch to a different health insurer. Trust also impacts health-related outcomes as well, as we see in this next slide. As customers become more compliant and follow instructions from health professionals, they are more likely to be healthier, an outcome that in turn reduces cost to serve for a health insurer. As we see in this slide, trusters more than distrusters are willing to follow instructions from their physician and also to follow guidance from their health insurer. As a consequence, trusters believe that they are healthier because of their health insurer. Finally, let's look at a price premium for trust. Research participants were asked to imagine the following scenario. 2 health insurers, A and B, both offer the same levels of coverage, the same claims processing and handling, and the same network of physicians. Health insurer A, however, consistently demonstrates a high level of trustworthiness, and health insurer B not so much. When asked, how much more per month, if any, would you be willing to pay in premiums for selecting health insurer A over B, research participants reported a willingness to pay an average of $29 more per month for a health insurer with a high level of trustworthiness. And, in fact, 18% of respondents reported a willingness to pay $51 or more per month. This finding, when multiplied by 1 million or more customers, represents a significant business opportunity and further helps to build a business case for investing in customers' trust. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. So, in summary, let me point out a few things here. First, we've looked through the trust lens to understand how customers view their health insurer, and we learned that 43% of customers do not trust their health insurer, a finding with major implications for health insurers in the future. Second, we've looked through that trust lens to see how trust impacts the perception of a health insurer on a variety of attributes, such as cooperative versus combative. And we learn that trusters and distrusters have widely varying views of their health insurer. Third, we've seen how trust levels vary within health insurers, and we learned that all health insurers examined have a mixture of distrusters, neutrals, and trusters, and all have room to improve. Fourth, we looked at the concepts of trust capacity and share of trust. And we learned that correcting for customers' individual disposition to be generally trusting provides another useful view. Fifth, we examined how the quality of customer experiences on the basics, on communications, and on goodwill impact the development of trust. And finally, we looked at how trust impacts the business outcomes of commitment, loyalty, advocacy, and also health compliance. and we learn that every health insurer has an opportunity to reap the rewards of building trust. In a general sense, I'll also point out a few other observations from this research. We noted that trust can in fact be measured. A health insurer can in fact know the extent to which it has earned the trust of its customers. It's not a philosophical mystery. We also see that trust provides actionable insight. For example, a health insurer could consider experimenting with actions that are designed to move neutrals into the trusters group. We see, too, that actions that improve trust can be both low cost and high return. Some, for example, are essentially free, such as warmly and genuinely thanking a customer for their business. We also see that customers do, in fact, care about trust. They actually notice and remember the behaviors of health insurers that enhance or diminish trust. And finally, trust provides a direction for growth. Given that trust is critical, and knowing the distinguishing experiences that separate trusters and distrusters, a health insurer's performance on those facets could in fact be measured and monitored and prioritized and created and used to create a high-impact roadmap. To say more about this final point and to finish our discussion today, Marc's going to talk a little bit about some building blocks for trust.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Before we jump into the building blocks of trust, I think it's worth noting that the premium numbers, the willingness to pay an increased premium on a monthly basis for a trustable health insurer, captures a significant amount of the value, but it doesn't capture all of it. So those figures are separate and distinct from the positive economic impact that increases in things like loyalty and advocacy would also contribute. When taken together, we think that the opportunity that exists through building a strong trustability platform is a significant one for health insurers. When we talk about building a trustability platform, we talk about 6 major building blocks. And as you see on this slide, those are divided into the 2 broad categories that Tom already discussed. The category at the top of the page is goodwill, or the intent of a health insurer to be trustworthy or to act in the best interests of its consumers. The category at the bottom of the page is competency, or the health insurer's behavior in the delivery of trustworthy actions. Each of those categories has a number of major subcomponents. We'll introduce them here in the next couple of slides, and we have another webinar planned to dive in deeply on the subject of how to build a trustability platform. And we hope that all of you will join us for that webinar, and Liz will provide some additional information at the end. As you can see on this slide, goodwill, the first category, is comprised of 3 building blocks: empathy, transparency, and accountability. We believe that these building blocks should guide health insurers in the development of organizational capabilities that will build and promote that trustability platform that I mentioned. So empathy is critical, and empathy means anticipating customers' needs, understanding the context in which they present those needs, and working with the consumer, with the member, to deliver beneficial solutions that meet those needs and do it within the context of the business of the health insurer. Transparency is proactively and reactively as well, communicating openly with customers about the information, policies, decisions, and outcomes that are relevant to a particular interaction or to a dialogue over time about a particular need. Accountability is the third and final subcomponent of goodwill. And accountability is a health insurer taking ownership and action at the individual level and at the organizational level when customers encounter negative experiences. This is a particularly powerful category, accountability, because it's what allows individual representatives of a health insurer to improve over time, and it's what allows an organization to capture those improvements to share them internally, and to move the performance of the whole organization in the positive direction. Together, empathy, transparency, and accountability are the three primary building blocks that impact goodwill. Competence can be broken down into customer experience, empowerment, and recognition. And we'll take a little bit deeper look at customer experience on the next slide. Empowerment, however, is training, enabling, and authorizing employees to take actions that earn or build customers' trust. These are concrete actions that can be implemented within your organizations. They are actions that many of your employees in our client work we've found would be overjoyed to be able to take. And these are sometimes the source of low-hanging fruit that organizations can quickly harvest to improve in the trustability framework. Recognition is the third component here, and that's recognizing and rewarding trust-building actions and other customer-centric behaviors. And recognition and reward, as we all know and have experienced, is a powerful motivator, and it's important that trust and goodwill and its components, goodwill and competence, be a part of the design of those recognition and reward programs. Okay, I said we would take a little bit deeper look at customer experience. Customer experience is a subcomponent of competence, and what we mean by it is delivering accessible, convenient, consistent, and credible experiences to customers. And probably the most important part of it is regardless of all else. So whether you are telling a customer the answer that he or she wants to hear, whether you're telling them something that is positive or something that is negative, whether you're telling them something that is expected or unexpected, all of those situations can be handled in a way that delivers a positive customer experience if done appropriately. And that's what we mean by regardless of all else. When you think about customer experience as it relates to trustability, there are a number of key questions that will lead you toward actions that you can take to improve in each of these areas. Those key questions are listed here. The first of those key questions revolves around your ability to deliver through the channels that consumers desire. And part of this is understanding at an individual consumer level, ideally, channel desires, and part of it is building the capabilities internally to be able to interact through those channels. The second key question is around your employees and the degree to which they are trained, they are relevant, they are empowered, and they understand the context and the customers that they are handling. A number of our clients that are aggressively pursuing trustability are using trust as an organizing tool in customer service and in other parts of the organization to attempt to better align customer service representatives with the pool of members or consumers that they are designed to handle. The third key question revolves around channel connectivity or cross-channel consistency. And so the question that you see on the slide are, do our customers receive the same messages and have access to the same capabilities across channels? And this one is an age-old challenge in insurance, and its impact from a trustability perspective is quite critical. It affects competency primarily, but it also bleeds over into goodwill, as an inability or an inconsistency across channels can sometimes be interpreted as an action that is designed to do just the opposite of acting in the customer's best interests. And so for that reason, it is critical to competence, but also has some effect on goodwill in addition. The next to last one revolves around commitments, making them and keeping them. And the final one is around measurement. As Tom mentioned at the tail end of his section, trustability, trustworthiness, and the subcomponents of it can be measured, and we encourage all of you to think about how to incorporate trustability measures into your customer or voice of customer programs. Once you've measured this topic, once you've measured this issue, we think it's a very compelling discussion to have to talk about how you can improve it and how, using some of the research results which Tom has discussed, you can create the business case that you can use to rally your organization around those improvements. On the final slide that we'll look at, what you see here is an example of how one organization has understood the issues and opportunities around trust, has developed a program of initiatives and activities and some investments to address those issues and opportunities, and has laid those out in a roadmap and has embarked upon the building of a platform for trustability. What you see in this example is about an 18-month effort by a leading organization that's broken the effort down into 3 phases. In each of those 3 phases, they are working through various teams to address high-impact opportunities and high-impact issues. And you can see in each of those phases, they've focused on just the most critical and high-impact things. So there are 7 initiatives to begin with, which are well underway, if not concluded. There are about 12 initiatives that are priority for the early part of this year, and the overall trustability platform building will conclude toward the end of this year with an additional 5 initiatives. But by understanding the issues and opportunities, by working through the actions that need to be taken for your particular organization, and by laying out a roadmap that's supported by a business case that relies on the data from our research that you've seen here today, a compelling trustability platform can be an attainable goal for all of you in the coming years. And we would love to talk further about our experience in helping organizations do that if that's of interest to you. At this point, I'll turn it over to Liz for some closing comments and Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much, Marc. That was really great to both Tom and Marc for some really great insight. We have a couple minutes, and I know we have a few questions to get to. So before we quickly get to those, I just wanted to remind you that we covered a lot today. So if you'd like a PDF copy of the deck, there is a download presentation button at the bottom of your screen that you can download the PDF version. And we'll also be sending all attendees an email with a link to the archived version of this webinar, so you can share it with your colleagues. You can review it, but you'll get a link to do that. And also, we're about to launch a survey to you guys during the Q&A. We hope that you can take a moment to take that survey about this experience. So we've got a couple questions. In the meantime, I just wanted to push this slide to you guys. We're just getting started. We've got lots of content. Marc and Tom had mentioned that there's another Roadmap to Trustability webinar we'll be doing March 28th that really delves deeper into the consulting, into the methodology and concept of actually building that trustability platform, as well as a number of other webinars and other opportunities to talk to us. So I'll leave this slide up and maybe just get to some questions. We've got one maybe to start things off. Perhaps, Marc, you want to start with this one, is what is the impact of a surprise on the trust or distrust model? So, for example, if a member is told one thing but something else happens, how would that influence trustability?
Sure. Thanks, Liz. I think there's a couple of components to think about related to that question. The first is, as an organization, if you are surprised very frequently, then that should tell you something about your understanding of the customer base that you're dealing with, about the readiness of your organization to handle those customers, and about what you need to do internally to address that issue. And so I think number one would be surprises shouldn't happen frequently, because if they do, they are pointing to some other challenges as an organization that probably deserve a significant amount of focus. The second point would be that as long as they don't happen frequently, I would suggest that surprises that are handled well are not necessarily problems from a trust perspective. In fact, when we think about research outside of trust, sort of in general, customer service, we find that a difficulty or a problem that is resolved well and expeditiously and to the satisfaction of the consumer, often results in a more positive reaction than if there were no surprise or problem at all. And from a trust perspective, I don't think we would suggest that things would work differently. Finally, I would hope that as organizations, when there is a surprise, a problem, an unexpected challenge, that you work with the consumer to both resolve it and then in an appropriate way for your organization and for that particular consumer, attempt to make them understand what you've done so that that kind of negative situation doesn't arise again.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question. Tom, to you, based on the research, did you see any trust variation by product or age of members?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. We didn't ask consumers about the details of the specific facets of the plan that they have, but we did look at some trust differences by demographics. And in general, older consumers tend to be more trusting, and we also observe that individuals in the higher income brackets tend to be more distrusting.
Great. Well, thank you, Marc and Tom. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who did ask some other questions, anything we didn't get to, we will certainly get to via email, so expect an email from us in the very near future. This concludes our webinar, Measuring the Value of Trust for Health Insurers. And on behalf of the entire team, I want to thank you all for attending and hope you all have a great day. Thank you.